To begin with, on our next problem, I need to make a typing correction. Instead of minus 21x squared, that was supposed to be 11. So let's change that and make it minus 11x squared there. That was just a typing error on my part to begin with. So having done that, when we're looking at this one, we can't start solving this one by factoring yet, because before you factor, you need to get everything on one side so it's equal to 0. And factoring is always easier when the highest powered term is positive. That's going to make your factoring a whole lot easier to do. So here, my highest powered term is over here, and it's already positive. If I subtract 3x cubed from both sides, I'm going to have a negative for my highest power. That makes it harder. So I'm going to leave that term where it is. It's positive. The highest powered term's positive. That's the way I want it. So I'm going to move the other terms over to the left side. I add 11x squared to both sides, and I add 10x to both sides. Now on the right side, everything's opposites, so they cancel out, and I get 0, which is what I wanted. On the left side, there's no like terms over there. They're all separate. So we would have 3x to the third plus 11x squared plus 10x is equal to 0. Now, when I'm factoring this, I always look for a greatest common factor first. Here, there's no number except 1 that goes into 3, 11, and 10. So I don't need to factor out a number, but they do all have variables. And the smallest power of the variable in this case would be x to the first, or just x. So I'm going to factor out an x from every term. And I divide them by x to see what's left. 3x to the third divided by x is 3x squared. 11x squared divided by x is 11x. 10x divided by x is just 10. Like that. So we've got an x at the front. We know we're going to try to factor that parentheses and split it up into parts. Here's one of those where you could do either guessing and checking or that step-by-step process that we talked about. Multiply the first number times the last number. 3 times 10, we get 30. And then we have to think, what can we multiply to get 30? That's going to add up to that middle number of 11. So let's see, 1 times 30, that doesn't do it. 2 times 15, that doesn't do it. 3 times 10, that doesn't do it. 5 times 6, that doesn't. They multiply to be 30 and add up to 11. So we're going to leave the 3x squared the way it is. We're going to take the 11x and break it up using those two numbers that we just found. So plus 5x and plus 6x. And then we leave that 10 the way it is. Now we get into factoring by grouping. From the first group, 3x squared plus 5x, we would factor out an x, and we're left with 3x plus 5. From the next group, 6x plus 10, I can factor out a 2, and I'm left with 3x plus 5. So we can take that 3x plus 5, put it at the front, and then from the next group, from the first group, we have an x left over. From the second group, we have a plus 2 left over. So having factored everything, remember that greatest common factor of x is still there. We have x times 3x plus 5 times x plus 2. Now that we're done factoring, we take every factor, including the greatest common factor, and set them equal to 0. So we have x equals 0, 3x plus 5 equals 0, and x plus 2 equals 0. That first one has already got x by itself, so x equals 0 is one of our answers. The next one, you subtract 5, and we would have 3x equals negative 5. And then when we divide by 3, we have x equals negative 5/3. So that's our second answer. And then the last one, we subtract 2 from both sides. We would have x equals negative 2. The reason why this one could end up having 3 answers instead of 2 is because at the beginning, the highest power of our variable is 3. If the highest power of your variable is 3, you could have 0, 1, 2, or 3 answers. If the highest power of your variable was, say, 5, then you could have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 answers. You can't have more answers than the highest power of your variable. Let's try a next example. Here we have 4x squared plus 40 equals 26x. All right, we want to get it equal to 0. The highest powered term is over here, and it's already positive, so I'm going to leave that where it is. Here, I'm going to get everything on one side by moving that 26x over. I subtract 26x from both sides. That gives me 0 on the right side. There's no like terms on the left side, so putting them in order to make factoring easier, we have 4x squared minus 26x plus 40. So the first step for factoring is to look for a greatest common factor, which in this case would be 2. And to see what's left, I divide them all by 2. And we would be left with 2x squared minus 13x plus 20, like so. So now this one, you leave the 2 out front, and we need to try to factor the 2x squared minus 13x plus 20. You absolutely can go through that same step-by-step process that we went through on the previous example. If you wanted to try guessing and checking, you would notice that to get 2x squared, you would have to have 2x and x. And then let's see, if you keep going for a while, you would end up noticing that you would need a minus 5 and a minus 4 to get the factoring to work. Again, you can do guessing and checking like I just did, or you can do that step-by-step process if you don't happen to see right away what the answer would be. So now that I've got it factored, I'm going to set each factor equal to 0. I have 2 equals 0, 2x minus 5 equals 0, and x minus 4 equals 0. Now take a look at that first one, the 2 equals 0. There's no variable in there. That's just a number sentence. And here I'm just going to put a big X through that. A false number sentence like that is not going to give me any solutions to my equation. Looking at the next one then, I add 5 to both sides, and we would have 2x equals 5. Divide both sides by 2, I end up with x equals 5 halves. So that's one of my answers. And then the last equation, we add 4 to both sides, we would have x equals 4. That's the other answer. So here we ended up with 2 answers, x equals 5 halves and x equals 4. So when that greatest common factor at the front has a variable in it, you're often going to end up with x equals 0 as one of your answers. When that greatest common factor at the front does not have a variable in it, it's not going to give you an answer because there's no x in it.